There's already water out here.
Of course.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, they did have water.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for attending our What's Going On session. We're really delighted to have you here. My name is Koonce, and I have the extraordinary privilege of serving as President and Artistic Director of the Gateways Music Festival in association with the Eastman School of Music. As the moderator of this panel this afternoon, I'd like to begin by thanking AFA and the incredible team at the Sphinx organization for this amazing conference. Thank you very, very much. And also for this opportunity to showcase 4 organizations whose work in many ways, but not in the same ways, intersects with the work of the Sphinx organization and the field's overarching efforts to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. And while we'll talk about 4 organizations this afternoon, I'd like to acknowledge the work of other organizations around the world, really, who are proving that this music, this classical music, belongs to all of us. Organizations like the Koonce Symphony in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Bousquet in South Africa, and in the United States, Amani Winds, the Mary Anderson String Quartet, Castles of Our Skins, Color Music Festival, Inner City Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, El Sistema, Black Pearl Orchestra, Rachel Barton Pine's Music for by Black Composers, Harlem Chamber Players, Harlem Symphony Orchestra, and so many others. I'd also like to take this time to honor those who have paved the way for us. Singers like Marian Anderson and Paul Robeson, Arminta Hummings Dumasani, the founder of Gateways Music Festival, the founders of the National Association of Negro Musicians in 1919, Eileen Southern and her seminal work on Black musicians, and countless others who made a way out of no way, because that's what Black people do. They made a way to perform and play and compose the music that they loved. It is an honor for me to be here with this illustrious panel. And this afternoon, we have allotted everyone 5 minutes to talk about everything that they do, after which we really want to allot 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A, but really conversation, to have a dialogue. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Darin Atwater from the Soulful Symphony, Terrance Patterson from the Ritz Chamber Players, Nwanoku from the Chineke Foundation, and Laing, who's today representing Gateways Music Festival. So welcome. And I thought we would start with Darin. Can you tell us about Soulful Symphony and your work?
Sure. With this 5-minute time constraint and in the spirit of true improvisation.
We don't have a gong, so.
Yeah, I'm going to follow my lead sheet, and we'll riff on some changes in the Q&A. But yeah, Soulful Symphony started as a repository for my work as a growing and experimental composer. After an aha moment I had from a debut with the NSO in 1995 as both composer and pianist in a piano concerto I composed, to later being commissioned by the BSO for fanfare, all of which was later programmed by the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. That along with the lack of diversity in people of color within the ranks of the orchestras, there was an equal, if not greater, lack of diversity in terms of the repertoire reflective of American music. That's an issue that reaches as far back as 1895 when Dvorak came to America to lead one of the leading institutions, and he challenged the composers here who were trying to define themselves in terms of the national identity of the music here. And he said, look to your soil. And their response was, what ascendance comes from the music of Native Americans and slaves at the time? And so he took the lead and composed his 9th symphony, the New World Symphony, laced with Native American and African American influences. And it was called the Negrophile, and composed the American Quartet, and took the lead on that. So kind of on the heels of kind of being ensconced in that revelation, I composed a piece of music called Song in a Strange Land, which was a suite and amalgamation of spirituals. It was the first time it was kind of rejoined to instrumentation, focused on American roots music, jazz, blues, hip hop, rock, soul, and along with forming and staging and producing an orchestra as a sonic and a social response to the absence of this brown hue representation, and also as a bridge that connects high art to kind of our modern American culture. And from that, some of the highlights, we formed a concert. Debut was February 2006 in Baltimore. 3 years later, we formed a partnership with the BSO as an artistic affiliate, and we shared space at both the Meyerhoff Symphony Hall in Baltimore and Strathmore in Bethesda. 2009, we won an Emmy Award for Song in a Strange Land, which was one of the longest running pledge specials on both PBS and APT. Later, we had a Hippodrome theater residency with Broadway Across America from 2011 to 2014. We were the first ensemble to perform in the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Smithsonian in DC, both for the commemorative opening and the MLK 50. We've just undergone a 3-year organizational restructure, celebrating 18 years of unprecedented sold-out performances, and we're about 2 weeks from announcing a significant long-term private-public partnership with our own performance spaces, so we're excited about that. Our vision is to become the most innovative and accessible arts organization. Our mission is to preserve, present, interpret, celebrate, and shape American culture with a special emphasis on African American music. Our journey to fulfillment of these missions and our vision is to embark on we're about the business of creating music, creating experiences, creating memories, creating culture. Culture, we are nothing without culture. Everything that we do is an expression and a continuation of our culture. Contrary to popular belief, social, political, economic systems were all historically put here in place to support culture, not the other way around. Concentric, we engage artists and audiences concentrically from local to regional to national, international, and utilize the rich history and legacy of American culture to draw audiences from all over the world. Working concentrically ensures that local artists and audiences are always at the center. Cultivate, we have a commitment to not only educate, but to also cultivate. An emphasis on cultivation ensures commitment to growth and prosperity as opposed to just importing of knowledge and information. We seek to collaborate with artists and organizations across the full spectrum of arts and culture and explore their intersection of American arts and culture. Community, we engage the entire community and foster a sense of social continuity. We say we're welcome. We invite Big Mom and them and everybody. That's kind of a comprehensive thing for us. And our strategy to actualize these beliefs and visions and our mission is that, one, we framed and reconfigured the symphony orchestra around our national identity, meaning that we included things like the rhythm section that comes out of pop music, Hammond B3, non-traditional instruments like the saxophone section, vocals, choirs. B, we champion a symphonic framework around American roots music, that you're going to hear that a lot from me, that challenges the assumptions around the so-called superior nature of European culture and the guardians of the classical tradition who assert and assume at every turn the inherent superiority of their art, regarding it as the highest achievement of the human race in the art of sound and as the norm and ideal for all musical excellence. Parenthetically speaking, classical composers did not think of themselves in any way separate from the vernacular of their day. They actually drew upon it. All of Chopin's, his whole compendium of piano works is all Polish dances. Handel's music for the Royal Fireworks was party music for the coronation of King George I. It's almost like Jay-Z's Big Pimpin'. Same vibe. Mahler, 4, 5, 2, 6, all Austrian folk music. Tchaikovsky, we know, 6th Symphony, 4th Symphony, Swan Lake, all of that is Russian folk music. Norwegian with Grieg, the whole idea. So our idea is to create a repository of works that are comprehensive across genres and eras of American music. My own works, jazz, classical. I just had a commission with the Philadelphia Orchestra for the centennial of Bernstein's West Side Story, which I created. 3, we celebrate and advance the achievement of African Americans and our central role in the formation of all American music, again, framed around the symphony orchestra. 4, we create an experience that's accessible and reflective of our communities we serve, a return to ritual where music and culture are the gathering place for our collective values, struggles, and triumphs. And lastly, if classical music in America were to experience a Browning tomorrow, it would still be faced with the same problem, which is audience cultivation.
Yes.
It's a content issue for me. It's the focus of our music and the accessibility and the formation of our American roots framed around the symphony orchestra. That's Soulful Symphony, that's who we are, and that's what we do. I think that's about 433 John Cage.
All righty then. All right. Thank you, Darin. That was amazing. And there are a lot of things I think you'd like to come back to, some really provocative thoughts. So,
Sure.
Mr. Patterson, sir, would you like to talk about the Ritz Chamber Players?
Sure. Thank you again for having me here. Hello, everyone. The Ritz Chamber Players, where our focus is chamber music, obviously. We get our name from a theater that was a historic theater in Jacksonville, Florida, called the Ritz Theater and La Villa Museum. And we keep the name to, of course, look back on this theater that was the one place in Jacksonville where stars like these people, when you came during segregated times, that's where you could, where all the performances were held. So our mission, of course, is to have classical music be as multicultural as our society is. So all of our players are Black. They come from all over, similar to Sphinx. They come from everywhere. And what we do a little bit different is that we have a concert series. So we play through a whole season in Jacksonville and Atlanta. And with that, we do our main stage concerts. We do afternoon concerts geared toward, at our museum in Jacksonville, it's geared towards our seniors community and our people who also cannot get out at night. Of course, we do much work in our schools with a lot of our partners. Since we are we do our educational outreach to many of our local partners, like Cathedral Arts. I don't know if y'all know these things, but these organizations that are working with children in Jacksonville. So, and with that, a large part of also what we really enjoy doing, of course, is playing a lot of our living Black composers. Since our founding year, we've had what we call composers in residence every year. So George Walker, we have had Adolphus Hellstork, James Lee III, teaches at Morgan. I don't know if you know him, fantastic composer, and on and on and on. And also expanding the idea of I forgot where I was going with that. Scratch that. Working with these composers for us is a really excellent thing for all of us to enjoy, actually. So like last week, we premiered a new work by James Lee, written for our soprano Allison Buchanan. And so it's, it is fantastic times with them as well as, for the ensemble. We continue to, I don't know, we probably hopefully have been in a city where some of you all are. We're managed by John Gingrich, so we do a little bit of touring, but again, our main focus is to be a series in a community, trying to do that continuous work, so hopefully we can once we bring you hopefully into the classical music genre, we hope to keep you and continue on over this fantastic journey of learning about this fantastic art form. So that's a chamber player, so I'm looking forward to if you have any questions about that.
Terrific. Thank you, Terrance. Thank you very much. And next, who still looks like she's composing some of her amazing thoughts here, Chi is going to tell us a little bit about the Chineke Foundation.
Yes, I've written it all down because once I like to time it, because if there wasn't a time restriction, I would speak off paper. But anyway. In 2015, I created the Chineke Foundation to provide career opportunities to young Black and minority ethnic, which I'll call BME from now on, classical musicians in the UK and Europe. Our motto is championing change and celebrating diversity in classical music. We aim to be a catalyst for change, realizing existing diversity targets within the industry, by increasing the representation of BME musicians in British and European orchestras. If there's time during the Q&A, I'd love to share the light bulb moment when Chineke was actually, when it went off in my head. Our flagship ensemble, the Chineke Orchestra, comprises exceptional musicians from across the continent and some from further afield, including the USA and Africa. And we come together several times a year. As Europe's first majority black and minority ethnic orchestra, we perform a mixture of standard orchestral repertoire alongside the works of BME composers, both past and present, in every concert. We work closely with our sister ensemble, the Chineke Junior Orchestra, a youth orchestra of BME players aged between 11 and 22 years of age, with senior players acting as mentors, teachers, and role models. Many of our juniors have already benefited from other existing youth schemes across the UK, and the Chineke Junior Orchestra acts as a bridge between such schemes and higher education, giving the players experience, encouragement, and confidence during their formative years, with the hope of increasing the numbers of BME candidates already studying music at third level. Within 6 months of our inaugural concert, this process saw Sheku Kane-Mason, one of our juniors, stepping up and becoming the first black teenager to win BBC Young Musician of the Year. The following competition in 2018 saw no fewer than 5 Chineke juniors reach category finals. The talent is out there, and the power of the role model is blindingly evident. Chineke juniors have gone on to gain places at top music schools and won scholarships to study at elite third-level institutions. My aim is to create a space where BME musicians can walk on the stage and know that they belong, in every sense of the word. If even one BME child feels that their colour is getting in the way of their musical ambitions, then I hope to inspire them, give them a platform, and show them that music of whatever kind is for all people. Many cultural organisations, such as the BBC, the Association of British Orchestras, the Royal Philharmonic Society, and the Arts Council England, agree with this sentiment and have supported Chineke. After our launch concert at the Queen Elizabeth Hall in September 2015, we were appointed as an associate orchestra of the South Bank Centre, and we now play there several times a year, as well as in other prominent venues across the UK and Europe. Chineke has been covered extensively by national and international press and broadcast media, most recently by the New York Times, and our work is featured prominently in the government's Departure of Culture, Media and Sports White Paper, it's funny that it's called the White Paper, on culture, published in March 2016. Chineke was shortlisted for the Royal Philharmonic Society Awards both in 2016 and 2017, and later this year we'll release our third CD, which is comprised of works by black British composers. All this tells me that creating Chineke was absolutely the right thing to do, despite the hate messages that I sometimes receive. I've called our aims ambitious in the past, but every day I learn a new thing and experience feelings that tell me that I should stop using words like that, like ambitious. To aim for an orchestra that truly reflects the community in which I live should be a normal activity. And I know that all the established orchestras take their work for granted as the norm. Therefore, I can't wait for the day when we are in the same position, and I will continue to strive until we also take our rightful place for granted in the classical music industry. Diversity should be business as usual. To finish, I'd like to say how proud we were in August 2017 as we became the youngest orchestra in history, we were not even 2 years old, to perform at the Royal Albert Hall as part of the BBC Proms. There's just one observation that I was scribbling down at the end, which is something that I've noticed and I've observed over the last few years that I've become more involved in the black and ethnic minority community, and that is that I see some of our brothers and sisters who are making it just walk through that door. I really think it's very important not to walk through the door and leave it open. We must walk through the door and hold it open for our others to come through that door. Thank you. Can we play the video, please? Just a short snippet.
Chineke exists
That's not the video that
to
I
try
sent.
and
Sorry.
redress the balance of who plays and does not play or is involved
You're playing
in
the wrong
classical.
It's the wrong video.
Why do we need
No,
a Chineke
it's the wrong video.
Foundation?
Sorry, the
We
one that I
need
sent
it
this afternoon.
because there are so many musicians out there
I
that,
said all this.
for some reason, aren't coming forward. And
Sorry.
I know for a fact that
Do
there
you
are
have the
many
other
of the
video?
reasons
Yes, they do. They
are
confirmed it.
because
Oh boy,
That
there's
lasts
always
about
a
7
little
minutes. I've
technical
sent
glitch
about
somewhere.
1.5 minutes of video. That lasts about 7 minutes.
Oh gosh. So let's
I-
move on, but
yeah.
maybe you can
Okay.
identify that other video. But while they're looking for that, why don't we go to Alex, and who will talk about the Gateways Music Festival. And he wears many, many hats, as many of you know, but he's here today as a board member of Gateways Music
Right.
Festival and our principal clarinet.
Right. So, thanks. So the leader of Gateways is sitting here on stage, which is late, and he felt that he couldn't speak about Gateways because he's facilitating this panel.
I'm trying to be like,
So he's trying to be egalitarian, so he asked me to stand. So I am a board member for Gateways. I'm proudly serve on the board of directors. We have a video which I think will tell the story of Gateways, but just to contextualize it, Gateways identifies itself as being connected to and part of that tradition of communities of musicians of African descent who play so-called classical music. And Lee spoke of a number of those organizations, National Association of Negro Musicians. That's the tradition that Gateways sees itself coming out of. Gateways believes that classical music played by musicians of African descent needs a home to be, for the music to be celebrated, for the artists to be connected, and for the tradition of just that, classical music played by people of African descent, to be nurtured and continued. But this video, I think, will do a much better job of contextualizing it. And in the absence of Lee, if we could just roll this video, that'd be great.
People of African descent have been involved in classical music since the beginning.
This is not about diversity. This music belongs to us. This music belongs to everybody.
Open your ears to hear and understand something that you perhaps don't understand, which is that excellence comes in all people.
Going from 2 to see if this works now with the cellos divided.
The mission of Gateways Music Festival is to connect and support professional classical musicians of African descent and enrich and enlighten communities through the power of performance. Gateways is growing exponentially. We have 125 musicians now. When I first started with Gateways, maybe the full orchestra was 65, so it's doubled.
I've been involved with Gateways since it came to Rochester in 1995. There is a passion for this festival. It's palpable. There is an added ingredient that is the product of shared life experiences that the musicians largely don't get anyplace else.
And the un poco più mosso, that's Italian for hurtling through space.
The thing that's most striking about the Gateways Music Festival is when you see
a complete stage, a complete symphony orchestra that is entirely African American, because you just never do. And then of course to hear it, the level of players is tremendous.
There's so many discussions in the field about how few African Americans there are and the dearth of players and talent that supposedly exists. And when you concentrate that on one stage as large as Eastman Theater, it demonstrates quite the contrary.
When the Gateways Festival Orchestra walks out on stage, a new line of inquiry or a new conversation is opened with the audience before we've even played a note. Because the backdrop of classical music is that this is a white art form.
Eastman School of Music has been a supporter of Gateways Music Festival since the very beginning, but kind of behind the scenes. We really needed more support because the festival is growing so quickly. And so the University of Rochester and Eastman School of Music have become partners with Gateways so that we can grow this festival because it's important.
Classical music has not traditionally reflected the population of our country as a whole. I want Eastman to be part of anything that celebrates great music and great music making. And the fact to celebrate this particular area of African American ancestry, I think is just fantastic for Eastman.
We might be few in numbers where we are, but when I come to Gateways, I'm one of many.
There's something so incredibly profound and powerful of seeing other people that look like you know, and do what you do at the level that you do it.
You could just feel the love in the room, looking around people's smiling faces, you know. It's uplifting. I wish I could bottle this up and take it home with me, you know. It's energizing, it's family, it's love, it's heart, it's soul, it's music.
I personally struggle, and always have, with a sense of hopelessness about race in America. When I see that stage, I think, you know, just maybe, it feels really good to see people on that stage, and it eases my sense of hopelessness.
Thank you very much. Alex, any further additional words?
You know, I think the musicians of Gateways, you know, do a great job of telling the story of what it means and why it's important and why it's important to them personally. I think we've spoken to it.
Thank you, Alex. And Chichi, were we able to find that video for Chichi? I think we've got a couple minutes. We can make that happen if you. Oh boy. Okay. So perhaps we can put it on our page.
Could you play the last 30 seconds of it, please? Perhaps just the last 30 seconds of it, of the one that you had, so we can hear some music rather than talking. Such a shame. Could they confirm that they had everything this afternoon?
Okay, they're working on it. Well, while they're doing that, thank you to our panelists. You guys are just amazing. Thank you very, very much. And hearing about the program is so exciting to me, and I feel like, you know, I want to be a part of every one of your organizations, right?
You are.
Well, I am. Yeah, but there is also a lot of crossover between our musicians. I think if you see this video from Gateways, you'll see musicians who play in Ritz, who play in Soulful Symphony, who might play in Chineke. And so there is a community building, and I think that is incredibly important and very exciting. And so we are really doing great on time. I don't know how that happened, but thank you very much for that. Because we really want this to be an opportunity for you to engage this group of leaders in conversations about your experiences, about ways that you can possibly get involved in one of these organizations. So I think, I can't see Anne, but I know, there she is. Oh, great, great, great. So we're going to show this, and then we'll go to Anne with some questions.
was the end of our very first concert. And 5 days before that, almost no two people knew each other. So we had a lot to do in a short space
Say that
of
again.
time.
What did you say? Before that?
5 days before that concert, almost, virtually no two people knew each other or had played together before.
Incredible.
So
Amazing.
a lot of work in short space of time. Because, in England, we're just isolated. We don't have a network, but we do now.
You're building one.
We're building one
That's
now.
right, exactly. Thank you all. And then some questions and some comments from all of you.
Sure. One audience member asked, what do your audiences look like? Are audience members primarily Black and minority, white, or reflective of the community you play for?
That's a terrific question. Who would like to field that? Terrance? I think we all should.
Yeah, I think for us, the Ritz Chamber Players, we have a minority audience of about maybe 40%. So, but we still, I mean, we work hard at getting them, to our community to come. But but hopefully we still, work with groups and everything. But it's about 40%, and but it's growing, and that's always exciting.
Chi-Chi?
2 weeks before our first concert, we knew that we had sold out the Queen Elizabeth Hall at the South Bank Centre in London, but I did not know who was going to be in the audience, apart from my immediate family and my close friends. The Queen Elizabeth Hall is my second home, and I've been playing there for the last 38 years. I know I don't look old enough to have been doing that, but that's an absolute fact. And the audience has always looked completely the same. I had never seen a Black person in the audience, occasionally one person. My family stopped coming to my concerts years ago because they were being told to shh all the time. And so there are manners, there are certain behaviors as well. Now, when we walked out onto the stage, we walked out on, we all come on tuned all together with the conductor. We came out to a standing ovation. It's the night of my life that I will never forget as long as I live. Standing ovation. And the hall was stuffed with people, and it looked like London. And everyone was on their feet cheering, and it looked like London. And I know for a fact there were many people there. It was a bit like when you go for dinner in Spain or Italy. Whole families go out for dinner, even if it's midnight, from great-grandchild to great-grandmother. And so whole families were there, and people were there, I know, who had never even stepped inside the South Bank Centre before, let alone into a concert hall. And I know for a fact, what's so beautiful is the fact that some of those people who heard Beethoven's Symphony No. 7 for the first time in their lives are going back to concerts, whether we're playing or not. So I reckon we've moved the dial as far as audience development is concerned.
So Gateways happens in Rochester, and the audience for Gateways concerts, it's about 50% African American, 50% white and other, which is actually not really reflective of the city of Rochester or even the country. So we certainly get a lot of support from the Black community in Rochester. But of course, Rochester is a music-loving community, and they come out and support us as well.
And a lot of our work is in the community. So over the 6 days of the festival, 45 of our concerts are in the community at Black churches, at other venues throughout the community. So
right. So at the Black church, the audience looks Black.
Predominantly. Darin.
Our situation is a little bit unique in that after our first concert in 2000 that we kind of self-produced, we got asked to do a performance at the Meyerhoff again for the board and the staff, upper management, and they ratified us as an artistic affiliate, which was a slick word for their diversity initiative. So the diversity initiative was kind of filled by Soulful Symphony, and that positioned us in terms of marketing. It polarized, which was already a polarizing city of Baltimore, Maryland. So as a marketing strategy, most of our audience was African American, maybe 30% other. Ironically, when we performed in Bethesda, Maryland, 5 minutes outside of DC, it was about 50-50, so the mix was different because the marketing wasn't as intense in Baltimore. So we've had the job of not only cultivating an audience, but again, we're not a repertory orchestra, so most of our works are new works into the canon of American music through symphonic, the symphony orchestra. So the cultivation of a new repertoire and the cultivation of a new audience, 18 years has kind of been that kind of call and response between communities and demystifying what it means to come into a concert hall, because there are all these kind of rules and regulations and etiquette things. So we've kind of demystified that, and it's really a non-traditional, traditional experience.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. Other?
I can pass it over there. Hello, my name is Simone Seals. Chichi, my question's for you, but really for everyone. What was the thing that pushed you finally to do something? Was it, you always had the idea in the back of your head and you just wake up one morning and you're like, okay, screw it, I'm finally gonna start? No. And then how did you actually, what was like the first stepping stone for these ensembles?
Thank you for your question. I'd had a complete career living in a white world, playing white people's music my entire career, and I was happy as Larry. Although I knew I was the odd one out in a certain way, but I'd never had the conversation with anyone. It's not that I didn't think about having a conversation, but I didn't know who I might start that conversation with, or how people felt, because it was never spoken. And I didn't want to appear defensive if I started a conversation, or paranoid, so the conversation never happened until Ed Vaizey, the previous culture minister, started calling me into Westminster and said to me, why do we only ever see you, Chichi, regularly on the international concert platform? And to begin with, I wasn't quite sure what he meant. I'd say, well, I'm going on the stage with the orchestra that I used to play with. And then when I then triggered what he meant, I made him spit it out. And then he said, then I said to him, well, actually, when you see me walking onto the stage, I'm going on the stage to do my job. I'm a musician. I've never defined myself by my skin color. Perhaps that's what you see first, but trust me, I'm playing the right notes as well. And anyway, I was on my way to a concert wearing my National Youth Orchestra board hat on. I was going to hear the Kinshasa Orchestra playing at the Royal Festival Hall, and it was their 10th anniversary, and I'd never heard of this orchestra before. And I was walking from Waterloo Station to the Royal Festival Hall, and who did I fall into step with but Ed Vaizey, the culture minister. And he said, I guess you're going to the same concert as me. I said, yeah, I probably am. He said, well, come with me to the pre-concert reception. I said, well, I haven't been invited. He said, well, you're with me, so you're coming. So up we go to the reception. We're met at the door by Gillian Moore, who's a good friend of mine, and she is head of music at the South Bank, and she was head. Entered the room, she clapped her hands over her face, and then we all started talking at the same time. I said, look, I know I haven't been invited. And Ed Vaizey was saying, well, she's with me, so she's coming. And Gillian saying, oh my God, you should have been on the guest list. But what frightened Gillian the most, she said, look over there. And in the corner of the room, another friend of mine, well-known violin soloist, Tasmin Little, an English soloist, she was giving an interview to a huge BBC TV camera, making a documentary about the African orchestra. Now, they were, in conjunction with the Arts Council and the BBC, they were making a documentary about Kinshasa. And guess what? So Gillian was freaking out saying, well, what does Tasmin know about Africa? And I became very quiet, and it felt like when I was at the start of the 100 meters, where I blanked out all sound, I couldn't hear anything. And I became crystal clear with clarity, and I said to her, don't worry about this, Gillian. We are used to this. You've been telling our story for centuries. But now that I'm here for this concert, we'll talk about this later. I'm going to enjoy this concert. And then it was extraordinary, actually. It was like I was the elephant in the room, and I hadn't even been invited. And I was the only black person in the room. And this was for the Kinshasa Orchestra concert. And I popped that bubble. It was almost laughable. And everyone saw it at the same time. Ed Vaizey, the culture minister, and Gillian Moore, the head of music at the South Bank. I said, let's go enjoy the concert. And it was extraordinary. I spent a lot of time looking at the audience, and But on the way home, and it was a marvelous concert, on the way home, I looked to my right and my left, and I thought, no, that's why Ed Vasey is speaking to me about this. This is the 21st Beethoven or Berlioz. That was a Sunday evening. Monday morning, I was on the phone. My face was melting against the phone. And I just literally called every single establishment and establishment with conversation. The rest is history.
Terrance and Darin, if you... Terrance and Darin? Oh, Alex? Go right ahead.
Oh, thank you. A lot of us here are music educators, and one of the challenges that we face when programming is not only trying to find representative composers of color and minority groups, but also repertoire that can be played by up-and-coming younger musicians, starting at all ages. So I'm wondering if any of you have started any initiatives or have arrangements that can be purchased or shared for youth orchestras specifically.
I think that Rachel Barton Pine's foundation has a lot of that. Have you searched that? Rachel Barton Pine?
We do have some of those materials.
Oh, okay.
I'm wondering if there are more.
If there are more.
Yeah.
And you're looking for things that are for youth level?
Yeah,
I think that
or
there
also arrangements. I mean, we play so many arrangements of Mahler, Dvorak, Beethoven that have been simplified for beginner strings, for beginner winds.
Our junior orchestra plays Chevalier de Saint-Georges quite a lot, and we've got some arrangements of Ignatius Sancho, who was taken as a boy from Africa to Brazil, Portugal, and then dumped in England. He wrote beautiful, lovely dance suites, and there's some lovely things that he wrote. And the juniors have played some fabulous music by Samuel Coleridge Taylor as well. There's the children's intermezzo. There's the.
I'm gonna write this down.
Yeah, check out Samuel Coleridge Taylor.
And there's also the Center for Black Music Research in Chicago. If you don't know about it, it is the world's kind of repository for music by people of African descent. So that's a great place to start as well. And there's some other resources around the country as well. Any other?
Yeah, I mean, if you're open to the expression of American classical music through our roots music, hip-hop, classical, gospel, jazz, we've kind of been at the tip of the spear of not only a repository for my work, but the work of Billy Childs, Wynton Marsalis, David Baker. All of that music is kind of laced right with our American timbre. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Another organization you might reach out to is Charles Dickerson and the Inner City Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles. They're doing some really amazing work.
Here?
And he's working with, I think, the kids you're thinking of right about that age. So the stuff they're doing might be of use to you as well.
Great suggestion.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Maya. You kind of sort of hinted at this question a little bit. I'm an intern for the Ann Arbor Symphony, and a question that's been going around is that we have a lot of community engagement programs, and we go out to schools and senior centers with like chamber music, but not a lot of those people who go to the places outside of the concert hall will come to the bigger symphony performances, even if there is a bit more diverse program, if there's a bit more living composer program. And I was wondering, for more like historically and established, more white ensembles, like what the solution could be, because a lot of yours, you start out with a diversity initiative, but a lot of places are still trying to implement them.
That's a big one. I think we could have we are having a conference about that, aren't we? I think I'll maybe start some of this. I think that part of the issue is, the work is a lot deeper as it relates to diversity and equity and inclusion that many orchestras have gotten to. So we're doing a lot of the surface work now. And so really being in and living in communities is essential. So I think that's a start. And the other is that for many communities of African descent, especially in metropolitan areas, the language of classical music is a foreign language. because our kids aren't getting it in schools the way that they used to. And it's not in churches the way that it used to be. So I think there's a need to really develop connections with communities that are deeper than what most of the initiatives in orchestras are doing, much, much deeper.
I mean, I would say that an initiative is something that has been layered on a tradition of music and art that we've extracted as a sound object, and it's not really baked into the soil of how it's birthed, a state of mind, a zeitgeist. And so America is yet to understand that the reflection of our culture is in the soil of what we do and how we become and how we fashion that. So if you have a sound object that is from 200 years ago and you try to make that accessible and relatable to an American who's 18, it's a cultural object, but it has no relevance in terms of who they are and what their experience is as an American.
So finding ways to make the connection deeper. And just because there's a black person in the orchestra, that's not going to bring out our community. The work has to be deeper. The connections have to be deeper.
This is for anyone, really. How do you feel about diversity as a catchphrase or concept, or something that is convenient for boards and orchestras to latch on to for ticket sales, and as a result of societal pressure, versus diversity as an actual workable concept that in its very nature needs to evolve away from being a topic of discussion in order to be successful? Do you think that this is helping or hurting efforts to forward the voice of underrepresented composers currently, and does this matter?
That's huge.
That's huge.
Oh my God.
Who'd like to tackle
I mean,
that?
for me, I can kind of crystallize it and distill it the same way. The commodification of culture forces us into like an apparatus of diversification to sustain a tradition based on like commodifying and commercialism and ticket sales and all these metrics that have nothing to do with the actual art. So when you go back to the art and breathing life into the art that is connected to people, there's no need for diversification, there's no need of audience cultivation. People flock to what they love. And so...
Yeah, I think there's some interesting, there's something interesting there about, and that I've been thinking a lot lately, and it's, you know, the classical music, the business, the industry has a positioning problem, and we've identified that we're shrinking audiences, and philanthropy is changing their funding strategies, and philanthropy is uncomfortable with the lack of diversity in the art form, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we see all these things as positioning problems, and they are, for sure. But I think that, my lived experience as an artist is that the art form and my experience in it has been weaker for the lack of diversity, for the lack of black people in my life doing this thing that I've been doing. And so I think that that's the question that the sister just asked a second ago, and the one that was just alluded to here. I think this is a real question for the business, which is, how is the art form weaker for the lack of diversity, right? How is the art form weaker for this? And that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I think it's food for thought for all of us.
And I would add that...
I understand what you mean about the almost the overuse of the word, and some people just slip the word diversity into anything and think they're off the hook. And in a way, it has become a buzzword. And I would also like for all of us to try and think of another word that doesn't suggest dividing, because I think we need to find a word that like diversity, but not diversity, but one that brings us all, that talks of us all, being inclusive with each other.
And I would just like to say for Gateways, we don't define ourselves as a diversity organization. We are black people being together, playing great music, right? And so whether or not it creates diversity in the field is not what our mission is about. It's not what our founding is about. And I think that is a concept that is very difficult for many people to understand in our field, right? So.
Hi, my name is Francisco, and my question is, how could you get involved in this ensembles, and what are the criteria? And as a second question, and more important question for me, is how do you define being black, especially considering that I'm Afro-Caribbean. And people may look at me and if I don't speak to them, they might say, oh yeah, he's black. But I know people who are Afro-descendant and just happen to be white. And so I'm curious, how do you define that problem or that definition?
That's a great question. For Gateways, we say people of African descent, and you can be any nationality. We have players who are from Germany, from London, from South America. My mother is Colombian. And so it's people of African descent of any nationality. You can come from Russia, you can come from China. But if you identify as a person of African descent, you can be a part of Gateways. So.
Yeah, we think we're the same way, the African diaspora. So.
I've been called a racist in the last couple of years, and it's funny because it's a word that I've never actually openly used. And when people messages have come back to me where people have said, she's making the matter worse. There's not a diversity problem. What is she doing? Is she racist now? And it's extraordinary because the Chineke Orchestra, we're not outwardly saying that the industry is racist. What we're saying is that the industry needs diversification. Yes. That word that I'm really annoyed about, but it's.
We've got to come up with another one.
We're actually, our first concert was strictly black and minority ethnic, and we had 31 nationalities in that orchestra that you saw in that clip. And I mean, I'm Irish Nigerian Irish, and so I counted that as two. But we are majority black and minority ethnic. We're like a mirror image of the industry, but we're doing much better as far as diversity is concerned, because you'll see white faces. They're not necessarily all English. There might be Bulgarian, Italian, white Aborigine, you name it. Everyone is it's inclusive.
And thank you all so much for this amazing conversation. I think there's this red sign in front of us flashing that says time's up. So I want to thank our amazing panel for your great comments and you for being such a great audience. Thank you so much.